Yeah, g'day, Wildlife and Science Films here today. Well, what I want to talk about are the pros and cons of owning the Blackmagic Pocket 6K Pro camera here. All right, let's get on with it. Okay, so what are the pros of owning such a camera? Well, you can see the form factor of this camera is like a DSLR, right? It's pretty much identical to a sort of little bit largish DSLR, and that means it's going to be comfortable to hold, and indeed it is very comfortable to hand hold this camera. That's the first thing. The second thing is because it's basically the size of a large DSLR, it means it's easily put into any small bag, or you can just carry it over your shoulder. So if you're shooting documentaries in the field, you've got a professional camera which is no bigger than a DSLR, and also you can take stills photos like a DSLR, and you can use those stills in your production. Now, having this small form factor like a DSLR means that when you go to check in your luggage, if you're someone like me that's flying all the time, you don't want to be charged for excess luggage, so you can just carry this over the shoulder as a camera. You've got a big screen on the back of it, and this screen is basically the same size as this screen, so it's the same basic size as the VideoSys 5-inch, and you have that screen on the back of here. The other pro about such a camera is all the controls that you're going to need are really on the camera in an ergonomic position. The record button is here, the ISO button, you've got white balance, everything is here on the camera, easily accessible. And that's really important because that means fast access. So if you've got this camera and you're moving around in a run and gun situation, this is where this will excel. Right, the other pro is it's rather lightweight for what it is, and that is it weighs just slightly over 1 kilogram. Now that may sound a lot, but for what it is, a professional 6K camera, that's not particularly heavy. And there's really nothing to add to this camera if you want to run and gun with it, because it's got the screen on the back. You just stick a lens on the front of it, and that's it. That's it. You could put a viewfinder on the thing, but essentially that's it. You've got a battery, you've got a big size Sony type battery inside of the thing, so you can get about 60 minutes of shooting time out of it. Another pro with this, and it's a great pro, and that's with the 6K Pro, and that is you've got neutral density filters. You've got real neutral density filters, and that's fantastic because that means you can take this thing out and shoot in any condition. So you've got the mega bright light conditions from the middle of the Sahara Desert on a cloudless sky to, and as I said, the low lighting capabilities in some, rickety market in Southeast Asia, undercovers, all that kind of stuff, or even down caving with this thing. I wouldn't take it caving because of the vents, you might suck in dust and stuff if it's a dusty cave, so I was just joking about the caving. Finally, I think the last pro on this is you've got a flip screen, and you've also got 3 different methods of storage. So you can have SD cards, you can have an external SSD plugged into it. You've also, it goes without saying, you've got professional XLR connectors in there and everything for audio. The actual audio too that it can record without using an external mic is pretty good. So that's another thing for just taking this thing on the move documentaries. It's a bit unobtrusive because you can just walk around with this thing in your hand. And it looks just like a DSLR. No one's going to pay too much of attention to it because it doesn't really look, to the uninitiated that is a professional 6K camera. So can you make a comparison between this 6K camera here and this 4K camera here? Well, I don't think so, because these two cameras have different end purposes. You can see how this is set up here. This is a rather minimalist setup, but it's certainly not a run and gun rig. There is just cables hanging off here. It's not meant for that. This is either got to be bolted to a tripod, or this has got to be the whole thing's got to be laying on a beanbag. Right, all right. And why do we choose this type of setup here for shooting wildlife as opposed to the 6K camera here, this form factor over here, and that is because we can get this thing very low to the ground. Essentially, we have a lens. You can see this is a lens here, and it's just with a bit of an extension out the back of it with the sensor hanging off the back, essentially. We can also take the screen from here, and we could take this screen with a longer HDMI cable or maybe even the SDI cable and have it a bit remote. So if we're filming something hazardous, the camera can be set up near the hazardous thing. Maybe that's, you know, some really poisonous ants or snakes or things like that, and we can be away from that, monitoring the situation. Advantage for us for this camera system is this thing packs small. Once we take the lens off this is a very small thing. I can still put this in a large pocket of a jacket, just the camera itself, obviously with nothing else here, but I can chuck that in a jacket pocket. This is getting too big to even put in a jacket pocket. Okay, I have, you know, this has got to go into a bag or just slung off my shoulder. We're specializing in scientific filmmaking, and because of that, we're doing a lot of macro work. Well, the micro 4/3 sensor is going to work better for us with all macro. Whether we have this bolted to a microscope or bolted to a big lens like this, we're going to get a very a bigger depth of field, and that's important to get as much in focus as possible when we're shooting macro. That's really important. Both these Blackmagic cameras are excellent in low light. And let's face it, all cameras are going to be great in bright light. They'll all work fantastic in this light here, but how do they perform in low light? Well, these things are killer cameras for great performance in low light. And coming back to the wildlife kind of situation, if we're now talking about shooting out down here, like in the bush down here like that, it's very low light, and we want to be using the best possible camera for that. So we've been using Blackmagic cameras for a while, and their performance in low light is excellent. Such a camera for wildlife filmmaking, what you have to consider is the run time of the camera. So as it comes as is, as you see it here, the battery, you're only going to get about 60 minutes out of it at tops. And the thing for shooting wildlife, you may have to have the camera on all the time, waiting for the action to happen or just before the action happens, because you don't necessarily know when the action will happen. It's not like in a studio and you're yelling action and the actors are going to perform. No, animals don't do it like that. And so that means you're going to have an external power supply on this for a practical sense. And in order to do that, you're going to have a cage for this or something to bolt that power supply onto, because you're not going to have it tethered to any batteries out in the field probably. And so you're going to increase the cost by having a cage on here. You're going to increase the bulk and the weight by having a cage. So that's that thing there too. So with this one here, you've got a cage. The cage is very small. So while we've got cameras, I don't have the actual battery on there now, but we've got an Indie Pro. You could have anyone on here, and I can put a much bigger Sony battery on there. I can put a D-tap and V-mounts on this as well too, and really extend the battery life on that. So you've still got to do the same thing on this. This makes it much bigger with the cage and more expensive. Con, if you're going to decide to use this type of camera for wildlife filmmaking, is it's really important to get eye level with animals. And if you're shooting small things, you want to get close to the ground. If you're putting this thing close on the ground, you'll notice that the fan output is here, and that means that if it's dirt on the ground, it's going to be blowing up dust around your lenses. Maybe that's okay if it's not your lenses. Or if you've got your hand or something you forget and you put this down on a beanbag if you want to get really close, well, that may occlude the fan there. You might get heating problems with such a camera setup there. However, with this, the fans are on the side. They're not on the bottom. They're on the side here, right? They're in behind here. They're a bit hard to see. They're in behind here. So the fans are on the side. They're not going to take up, be blowing any dust around the lens or what have you. And there's no chance you can put your hand around it because you have a cage there. So there you have it. That's my view on using the Blackmagic 6K Pro pocket camera, and my views on using the Blackmagic Micro Cinema Camera 4K G2. Both great cameras, both have completely different end uses. Yeah, it's up to you to make your own decision. But there's no right or wrong camera. You could use this for wildlife. It just means you're going to be in for a bigger build, as opposed to something like this, which is just a lens with something off there. And obviously, this has to be built in such a way which is ergonomic for the user, whereas this one, bang, is ergonomic straight away without a cage. All right, thanks for watching Wildlife and Science Films here.